Welcome to Off Panel.
Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the newly minted publisher of Oni Press. It's James Lucas Jones. Thanks for coming on, James.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
So we're doing this live. I'm in the Oni Press office, and we're going to go all over the place talking about everything Oni. But I want to talk about 2017 was Oni's 20th anniversary, right?
Technically the 20th anniversary started in December because we were late to the game in terms of publishing in 97. The first thing that Joe and Bob had put out was a printing of Frank Miller and Simon Bisley's Bad Boy that came out in December of 97. So we're just at the 20th anniversary, and we felt like 2018 was a better time to celebrate over the course of the year as we enjoyed our 20th year and really looked back at some of the things that we launched the company with, and a lot of the new titles that we have coming up this year too. I think just embody just the kind of books that we are publishing now, but have always published as well.
Yeah. So Bob Schreck and Joe Nosemack started in 1997. You came on in 1999. Was it you were like a freelancer working on the website, right?
That's correct.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
What was your path? Like, how did you? You're now Oni's publisher. I think you became editor-in-chief in 2004. What was your path along that way?
It was, odd. I don't know. I had studied communications in school. I had was not qualified to do anything then. I had decided to go back to school and study to be an electrical engineer, actually. And was working in tech, and then had been working at a school district, helping educators integrate technology into their classroom and helping with tech planning for the district. And I was working too many hours, and my commute was horrible, and I just wasn't really happy living in Phoenix. And my wife and I had gone to Comic-Con in 98 as kind of like a last-minute thing, and we had met Jamie Rich, who was Oni's editor-in-chief at the time and had just taken over for Bob Schreck when he had left to go work at DC. And also met a cartoonist named Andy Watson. And Andy and I started emailing back and forth, and I ended up putting up a big, actually like an Andy Watson fan website that Andy ended up adopting into his official site at the time.
That's awesome.
And then he introduced me to a couple people he was working with at Oni and a couple people he was working with at Dark Horse, and Jamie actually returned my emails. We just started emailing back and forth, and we had a lot of musical taste overlap and a lot of comic taste overlap, and I'd been active on some of the Oni, I think it was at the time like the Oni Yahoo fan group, which Steve Rolston was a regular participant on. Liz Prince, who recently had Tomboy come out as a graphic novel, was a regular. Like I think she was like the admin mod of that group at the time. And just met up with Jamie, and then I think we met in person for the first time at APE in 2000. And I was already starting to do some web stuff for them, and we hit it off when I met with Jamie and Joe in person, and I ended up moving to Portland 6 months later to start an office position as an assistant editor, and then still tackling the web stuff for a while after that.
Yeah, and then you just kind of somehow, you just stayed around. The next thing you know, you're editor-in-chief.
That's kind of how it happened. I mean, from a very early point, I think Jamie didn't necessarily think that he was going to be at Oni forever. I knew that he always had creative aspirations, and he had always wanted to write. And while I was surprised when he did, let us know that he was leaving, and he let us know towards the end of 2003 that he'd be leaving in the summer of 2004. I was not. It was much earlier than I expected. And yeah, at that point we were still a super small shop. It was just the three of us.
Yeah.
So,
Did you have designs working on comics or working in comics at all back before you came into Oni, or is it just something you were like you enjoyed it, but it just worked out that way?
yeah, I mean, I actually thought that I would end up in like magazine or newspaper publishing at some point if I landed in publishing. I never thought comics publishing would be it. I had worked at a store when I was in college, managing a small shop in Phoenix that was part of a larger chain. But yeah, I didn't think that publishing was necessarily in my future until
It happened.
yeah, until I kind of met Jamie, and there was weirdly enough like an introduction that he'd written for a Grendel Tales collection of a Darko McCann Eddie Bikovic mini series, and just the things that he wrote about in terms of editing them and having that be one of the first things that he'd worked on really spoke to me, and that was kind of when I decided that editing comics was something that I wanted to do.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious about like the evolution of Oni itself. When Oni started, it was all about finding different angles for comics that weren't being explored. Like one of the things that I love from Oni's Wikipedia page of all things is like there's the quote of like real mainstream about how like I don't even know who said that, but like basically like comics are the perception of mainstream for comics is superheroes, and like Oni was looking to get into the real mainstream, like the stories that are being told outside of comics. Looking at Oni's site reveals that you're still not looking for superheroes or like oversaturated genres or anything like that. I'm curious, like besides like sheer size, like what has changed in your time at Oni? Like how has it evolved?
Well, it's funny. I was talking to our publicity director, Melissa, about this yesterday. I had said, I almost feel like our whole ethos can be boiled down to the status quo sucks, and we all deserve better.
Right.
And I think that's I think that kind of works, just because I think that our position, but also the status quo keeps getting a little bit better. I feel like, particularly in comics and in terms of representation. And I think that when we first started publishing, and when I first came on board, there was a big focus on variety, which I think is a pretty distinct concept, at least in like the current 2018 marketplace, from diversity. And I think that while we were very successful at publishing a wide variety of content, our diversity stats were hit and miss.
Right.
It wasn't something that we necessarily were cognizant of, I think, until much later. But it's not like we didn't work with people of color or have books starring people of color or LGBTQ characters or whatnot. But I think our creative force was still predominantly white, and still is, and it's something that we're constantly looking at, and we're constantly just exploring like who is getting opportunities and who is having a seat at the table. And I think in 2003, that was really looking at everything with superheroes. There weren't a whole lot of opportunities for female-led books.
Right.
You and I were talking right before we were recording about like just that lineup for Oni was Queen and Country and Blue Monday and Hopeless Savages and Alice and Dare and Lost at Sea and all of these female leading books. And I think at the time we were publishing more female-led books than male, in part because it was a lot of what we were getting pitched, and we were one of the few houses that were willing to take on books that had a female lead. And I think for us, it's always been about a pop sensibility as well, like trying to balance that. Like we want to do books that are smart and that speak to an audience and speak to something larger. But I also think that at least when Joe started the company, with Bob, the companies that were still around or had the kind of longevity that we have now at 20 years, were all either very strictly like superhero publishers or super art house publishers,
Fantagraphics.
like your Fantagraphics
Mm-hmm.
type places, and like there's an old, I always attribute it to Evan Dorkin, and I think in a conversation recently he told me I was an idiot and that he didn't actually say that in typical Evan style, but it's one that I paraphrase often, and it's like trying to say that like Drawn and Quarterly or Fantagraphics are going to save comics is like saying that like Akira Kurosawa art house releases are going to save cinema.
Right.
It's like, it's silly. It's not that those things are not awesome and important and culturally relevant and influential, but like pop is still pop, and there is merit to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been the thing that set us apart, I think, from other indies, at least when we started, was that we had a very pop sensibility from the get-go.
Yeah, I do think that like in some ways, like the biggest difference between your state now versus your state back then is almost the world around you, like in comics, because it's like when you started, Scholastic Graphics wasn't around, like First Second wasn't around. All these publishers who do great stuff now, like that are kind of in your realm, maybe more in the book market, are around now, and it's like that world has evolved to the point where you have a lot of creators who are doing stuff and have more availability both through you and other publishers, which I think is great.
And I think we do too. And again, like going back to what I was saying before, the status quo is better than it was when we were in '97. So I think it's even more important for us to continue to try and find new ways to disrupt it in ways that are positive, and that continue to grow both the audience of comics through further representation and just further access of material.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it's all about for us.
Do you feel like, I mean, obviously you do your own thing, but now there's like Image and there's Boom. I mean, obviously there was Image before, but they were slightly different when you first started. And then there was like Boom, and there's all kinds of other publishers who do stuff that's more on the margins and everything like that. Is it something you consider to like differentiate from them when you're approaching books, or is that not something that really factor? You just kind of look for the best comics that fit your ethos?
I mean, I think it's hard because you're absolutely right. They're like, what would have been an Oni book 10 years ago could easily be published at Boom or Image now.
Yeah, I saw a copy of Fence out there.
Nobody would blink an eye. Yeah, and we're still a pretty actively reading company. Like there's stuff that all sorts of junk in that spinner rack of things that we try and pick up and at least stick with new series that we think are interesting for at least the first few issues, and then usually move to trade paperback. But I think that for us it's still about just finding things that we feel like fit our taste, that are not being served by the market the way that we think that they should be, and that are a little bit quirky and idiosyncratic, that have some personality. I think for me, as a reader, that's always been like I want to be able to tell who a artist or a cartoonist is from a page, if not a panel.
Right.
Like not being able to see a style or a personality or a voice is really not what it's about for me. Like house styles are not something we've ever leaned into.
Yeah. I kind of feel like it's like Oni, like the thing I can expect from Oni is I don't know what I can expect from you guys. It's like Kaiju Max. Like Kaiju Max is a book that you won't find anywhere else. Or like, I think My Boyfriend is a Bear sounds fantastic. And I really like Tea Dragon Society. Like these are books that you won't really find anywhere else. And it's kind of fascinating. It's like your brand is like almost like expect the unexpected. I know that's kind of weird, but
I would hope so. Again, I think it's us constantly trying to push and try new things and not be satisfied with the status quo of what is happening in the industry. Because our love affair with comics is with comics the medium, and we're pretty aware of the pitfalls and the problems of the industry. And it's our love of comics that trumps that and has us coming back to the industry despite whatever punches or kicks may be coming our way.
Yeah. So I did want to, speaking of like change-ups and everything like that, Oni, like you guys just announced that there was some musical chairs going on with your positions. Like you were editor-in-chief, now you're publisher. Ari Arwood is now the executive editor. Rachel Reed is now, God, what is her position? It's marketing manager.
manager.
Yeah, I mean, so like there's a lot of, moving parts. Like, what does that mean for your guys' day-to-day life? Is there no real change, or what does that mean?
Oh, I mean, I think there's definitely been a change, and the different styles of different editors is always going to have an effect. And Ari's sensibilities are not my sensibilities by any. I mean, we're very, very different people, and see things, differently, but with a nice Venn diagram of agreement. So I think that there's definitely been shifts. A lot of it has been maybe later than it should have. Like I think in some ways Joe has mentioned before that he had asked me to take over the publisher role several years ago, and I was reluctant. I've spent 18 years as an editor, and not having that as part of my identity was something that I personally struggled with probably more and longer than I should have. So moving into publisher was really an opportunity for me to kind of refocus and to try and pare down the scope of what I was trying to do with the company, and to delegate more, and to really let folks lean into their talents and their potential.
I'm not gonna lie, I have no idea. There's a number of publishers in comics, and it seems like there's varying degrees of like day-to-day like relationships, or like how they manage things, everything like that. What exactly does your job entail? Is it more like you're kind of the person who has a 10,000-foot view all the time?
Yeah, that's really it. And there's still more day-to-day stuff that I just out of habit, I'm trying to get better about not feeling like I have to be in every schedule or detail meeting. But yeah, it's looking at the publishing slate with Ari, like what it looks like for the next 2 years, like what we're rich on, what we're shy on. Talking with her and with Joe and with Charlie Chu, who's now used to be an editorial and is now our VP of Business and Creative Development, about like what opportunities there are for new business, whether that's bringing licensed comics, new licenses into Oni. We're very picky about our licensed books, but I think that we've obviously found an audience with them, and I think we do them really, really well. So we're going to continue to work in that arena as long as we feel like the project and the creatives that are involved are a good mesh with us. Yeah, and just trying to see what opportunities are for the company. We have a couple different initiatives that we're going to be launching over the course of this year, some of which are a long time coming, and things that I've wanted to do for years that just bandwidth has never allowed for it. Oni's interesting because we're 20 years old, but in a lot of ways we still feel like a startup in some ways, and so there are definitely systemic and things that I wish we could change, that it would be much easier if we could just stop publishing for 3 months and kind of reset. And it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I knew 10 years ago what I know now, and just in terms of setting up systems and things. But doing it all on the fly is a tricky process, and something I think we're constantly battling with.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to go forward all the time while still retrofitting and trying to like add new things on. Like like Limerence Press, that was like something you guys had on. That was Ari's baby, I think, and it was like the erotic side plus the LGBTQ side. I mean, like I think that's great. Like, and you guys got Ojoy Sex Toy was the first book. What else has come on from Limerence?
We did a reprint of Colleen Coover's Small Favors comics, which was her queer comic that she did for Fantagraphics' Eros imprint back in the early 2000s. So we did a big collection of all of that material that had never been under one cover before. We did a couple coloring books, one with Erica with her Ojoy stuff, and then another with a illustrator named Trungles.
Oh yeah, man, that would be really detailed coloring.
It's awesome. It's the Fawns and Fairies coloring book, and it's crazy. And his art's just fantastic. And then we have our next title that's releasing from that line is out this summer, and is actually kind of a new area for the line that is more in the gender and sexual studies area, like still in sex ed, but almost more gender studies. And it's a quick and easy guide to they, them pronouns.
Oh, okay.
That's more of a short book that just is an explanation of they, them pronouns and how they work in a second person context. And
That sounds
when to
extremely
use them.
helpful.
Yeah.
So I did want to ask about like kind of how how your business has changed, not necessarily business, like your publishing and everything like that, as things have evolved. Because like one of the things, I mean, society's changing, like how we engage with entertainment is changing, how the comic book medium has like, grown with like the book market's boomed while, other things might not necessarily have matched that. Like, how does that impact your approach? Like, do you kind of lean more towards the book market at all, or is it just all dependent on what's available to you?
I mean, I feel like we've always felt like the book market was a more appropriate home for us to a certain extent. Again, like, and this is not meant to reflect every comic shop, but the vast majority of comic shops are not comic book stores as much as they are superhero pop culture stores. That's what the focus of the store is. They are Marvel DC shops that carry, maybe some Image, and that they're a much more, and maybe some licensed books. And they're a much more limited shop. And there are great comic shops out there. We have several in Portland, and I've been lucky to be in ones all over the U.S. But at the end of the day, I think that they're not what's driving the direct market. And I think a lot of those stores, too, are not necessarily ordering titles exclusively from the direct market. I think a lot of them are smart enough or savvy enough to have accounts with book distributors and are looking at different ways that they can mitigate risk and still stock and serve their customers. And I think retail is being challenged across the board, not just comics retail, but every facet. Yeah. So I think comics retailers have definitely challenges ahead of them in 2018, but I think that there's opportunities for them to still continue to grow their business, and we're going to continue to serve that business. But yeah, I feel like a lot of our growth potential is more on the book and library side of the market.
Yeah, that was actually one thing I was going to bring up. I saw an article that you were part of where you said that the number one place that people discover Oni books is libraries. And I thought that was awesome. As a huge library user, I'm not surprised by that. I mean, like, that's how I discovered a bunch of manga series. That's how I discovered a bunch of different books. But, so is that something you guys, like, you just know, like, you've talked to librarians and it's just where people pick it up, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely something. We've done a little bit of market research. It's hard in comics with it being so niche to get realistic numbers. We've definitely leaned into trying to support the library market and finding new titles for that market in both the middle grade and in the YA space has been a priority for us. Reaching librarians, whether it's through journals or librarian conventions or whatever, has been a big thing for us. And we're just going to continue to make libraries and book market in general a priority in finding new ways to develop that readership and push that readership. I know we were talking about some of the reorganization and new roles for folks earlier. One thing that was not included in that announcement, because it had not happened yet, but we just hired on a new director of sales who's going to be working with our marketing department named Margot Wood, who is awesome, and I feel incredibly lucky to have her joining the staff. But her previous job before was she was one of the original marketing managers over at Epic Reads, which is HarperCollins's web social platform for YA novels and teen novels.
Yeah.
So working marketing for everything from Simon versus the Homo Sapien Agenda to Noelle Stevenson's Nimona, and really building fandoms for original IP for from that Harper was publishing, and just with how digital savvy she is and how well she knows the young adult and middle grade markets. I'm really excited about her joining and adding that perspective to our marketing department, and I think it's going to be a really positive move in context of the jump to Simon & Schuster for book market.
Yeah, that sounds like an amazing addition. But that actually, that's perfect time to bring up Simon & Schuster. For listeners that don't know, a lot of sales and distribution for trades and graphic novels goes through Diamond Book Distributors. You guys signed an agreement with Simon Schuster for them to handle that worldwide for you guys starting March 1st. Why was that the move to make?
Again, I think it's just we had felt like Diamond was servicing the book market, and there were things that they were doing well, but overall, it was not their primary market. It wasn't the primary market that they were focused on, and it wasn't the primary market that they had experience in.
Yeah, it's probably not where they have expertise in at all.
And yeah, exactly. Just on a corporate level, yeah, it just seemed like the opportunity with Simon was right for us, and the fit felt right. It was very much. I felt a little bit like Goldilocks, just in terms of like the different distribution partners that we had discussions with, and some were very big and distribute many comic publishers already, and some were very small and distribute a few comic publishers, but are still relatively small distribution. And Simon just felt just right.
Yeah.
Like they were already distributing Boom Studios' titles to the book market. They were already distributing Viz Media titles to the book market. They had just recently launched an internal graphic novel imprint.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I want to say it's Gallery 13,
Oh.
I think is the name of it.
I feel like I've heard of that, and I just didn't associate it.
One of the first book that I picked up from them is a new Jeff Lemire graphic novel that just came
Oh,
out.
Roughneck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's why I recognize it, because I remember seeing it on the back, and I was like, what is Gallery 13?
But yeah, so they felt like they had, like, again, like I feel like while what we do is different, there's enough overlap in that Venn diagram with Boom that having, there was going to be potential for add-on sales on those for vendors that were already, being sold to by Simon. And it just felt, the whole team there has been great so far. I mean, we've been working with them behind the scenes for the last 6 months trying to get ready for March 1st. And they've just been awesome. And yeah, we're really excited about it.
That's great. Last question before we jump into some chat about some specific Oni books. I want to ask about, this is like a weird question, because especially with the fact that you guys look at the book market so heavily. As a publisher, like, how do you decide? I know part of this comes from creators, but how do you decide between what you're going to publish in single issues or what you're going to publish as like a graphic novel? So like something like T-Dragon Society, like how does that come out in that form as opposed to coming out like single issues first? Like, do you have ideas behind that? Is that creator centric? What is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really about what we feel like is going to benefit it in the sales channels.
Sure.
The most. And I think there's been a boom in floppy publishing, like just in terms of non-Marvel DC, and I feel like those numbers upticked, and everybody saw it, Oni included, and I think everybody started scheduling more floppies and more periodicals and doing it with a wider customer base in mind.
Sure.
And I think for us, we definitely feel like we probably overextended a little bit on the floppies, and there are things that we would have been better off doing as graphic novels. So that in the future, that'll be part of the pivot, as we will be publishing less floppies over the next couple of years. Or it may end up being about equal, but the percentage will not be growing. But I think it's just because the direct market had, again, like there had been a renewed interest in floppy comics, and then I think over the last 6 months, it's become a lot harder for retailers. When you look at how much of them are subsidized by what degree to Marvel and DC both, and just like your talk with Pat the other day, like those numbers being down affects what stores can do across the board.
Right. And even beyond that, just look at previews.
Yeah.
It's a phone book.
So we're not abandoning the floppy format at all. Like we're launching a new series out of Free Comic Book Day that is a follow-up on the Sixth Gun. That's a new series, new cast of characters, but another haunted western from Hurt and Bun, and a new pair of artists that are working that. And we'll continue to do, we have, before that, we have Ed Brisson and his new series, Ballad of Sang, that launches in March with Alejandro Mizzelli, I believe is the artist on that, with Shari Shankama on colors. And that should be a lot of fun and is more of like an action thriller type series. So I think like the stuff that's super heavy genre and is paced for floppies, you know, if we feel like it's still a good medium for it, we'll continue to do. But we're going to be looking a lot more at digital serialization and building creators' brands through other methods other than periodical comics, just because, like we were saying before, I don't feel like our readership is necessarily that superhero readership that is shopping for things in that format anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's basically just a question of fit. It's like what fits in this, what fits in that.
Yeah, we always try to let content dictate format as much as possible. Like,
right.
And then the economic realities augment that decision accordingly. But yeah.
So I want to do a quick section where we talk about some of the big books and personal favorites from Oni's past, present, and future.
Okay.
Basically, I'm going to challenge you to come up with the first word that comes to your mind, and then we can talk about them a little bit. So we're going to start big. We're in a room that's literally surrounding us with Scott Pilgrim stuff. Scott Pilgrim.
Obnoxious. Man, Scott is so obnoxious.
You mean the character in specific?
Yeah, the character specifically. No, he like it's funny, that series. I
You were the editor of that, right?
Yeah, and just going through it with Brian, like if you look in terms of just like modern comics achievements, like that series is amazing.
Yeah.
The fact that the first volume came out in July of 2004 and the sixth volume came out in July of 2010, and in that 6-year span, you had, the first volume came out in July of 2000. No, 4. That's right. Yeah, it's just crazy that he was able to produce 1,200 pages of artwork in that span, get it ready to publish, and for him to stick the landing the way that he did, like it's something that, even aside from all of the media and the you know, critically acclaimed but, you know, box office nightmare film, like that book would be an accomplishment no matter what, that we would be proud of.
And that's a book that I can hand to anybody. Like my nephew, who doesn't really read comics, he has all the Scott Pilgrim books and he loves it. And that was before the movie. Like I got him into it and he was just like, this is amazing. This is incredible. Although I have to admit, I was always rooting for Kim Pine. A loss.
That's fair.
Lost at Sea.
Rough.
Yeah, it had an interesting history, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, and not that I think that the book is particularly rough, but it's just when that book was all coming together was like it came out in 2003. So Jamie had just let us know that he was leaving. Brian had just come off of a kind of awkward run on Hopeless Savages with Jen Van Meter, where another artist had to step in and help with inks on one of the issues, and it was just in terms of I'm way fond of overly complicated metaphors, and I always compare comics editorial to being an obstetrician. And it's not your baby. Like, you can tell the creator what you think is going to be the best thing for the book, and it's up to them to kind of, you know, take care of themselves and take care of the book until it's ready to come out into the world. And you get to help in that last step and look like the hero. And if that's the case, then like Lost at Sea is the one that was like delivered on like a subway train during a power outage, like in a tunnel. Like it's
high degree of difficulty.
Yeah, it just lots going on, and I think everybody's lives. And I had just become a new dad as well. Like my daughter was like 5 months old when that book came out.
Hopefully it wasn't on a subway.
Yeah, no. So yeah, it was just a really crazy time, I think, for both me and Mal. And yeah.
So this one will be interesting, given the nature of his position with you guys at one point. 12 Reasons Why I Love Her.
That book, oh man, one word.
You don't have to go one word, just your first thoughts.
It took a long time for that book to come out, despite the fact that it was one of the first things that Jamie wrote after he left. It's the first book that we did with Joelle Jones, and like I think it's a really important book just because it didn't just showcase her as an illustrator, but the nature of how the storytelling of that book and the way the tools that Jamie had kind of planned out with just the conceit of the chapters and how they went. She had so many opportunities to play in different styles and different storytelling formats, and it was a real, despite the fact that it was a pretty straight romance book, drama book. It had such opportunities for her to show off her skills as a cartoonist, and yeah, I think I'm really proud of that book and it being her kind of launch onto the scene.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of amazing. Like I think you guys have. Is it You Have Killed Me? Was that the one? Or
yeah.
Like that's where I discovered Joelle, and it's kind of funny. I mean, like she did Batman this week. It's kind of a crazy transition. I think of her more of like that type of stuff, and now she's drawing Batman. So good for her. But
well, and You've Killed Me and Batman isn't that far a stretch.
Yeah. There you go. Space Battle Lunchtime.
That book is awesome.
It is awesome.
It's just I don't know if it's true because I would have to. I haven't had a deep Oni comics conversation with him in a few months, but that was definitely my son's favorite Oni book while it was coming out. And that was the first thing that we approved out of the big open submissions talent search.
Oh, I didn't know that was an open submissions
open
one.
call that we did. And I think it's pretty public knowledge that I went into that whole thing unenthusiastic at best. And I was super wrong. And we found so much. I mean, we found a lot of stuff that was inappropriate too, but we found so many more things than I was anticipating as part of that search. But even if we had only found Space Battle, that would be enough.
Yeah, I this is a quick aside, but I was at my comic shop recently, and there was this guy I know who's like a local artist, and his kids were with him, and they were looking through all ages stuff. And he's like, "Have you read Space Battle Lunchtime? My kids love it." And I was like, "Oh man, I gotta pick this up. How have I not read this?" I mean, like, I love food. I love all ages books. I picked it up and I was like, "This is amazing. Why didn't I do this before?" But I thought that was great. Like, I have kids recommending stuff to me, which is really fantastic.
That's awesome.
All right, Sixth Gun.
Epic.
That was is that the longest single issue book you guys have done?
It probably is, like it and Wasteland.
Yeah, Wasteland went for a long time.
Wasteland went for 60 and Sixth Gun went for 50, but Sixth Gun had like
Bunch of
3
minis.
spin-off minis.
Yeah.
So I think overall there's 65 issues of Sixth Gun.
I like that you guys are doing their next book as a free comic book day book, because that's where I discovered the Sixth Gun and it got me hooked on it. And so that was a great way to get people on there.
It's one of the few times I feel like Free Comic Book Day has worked for us. Like,
right.
I love the day and I love participating in it, but just in terms of it actually bringing in new readers, like the numbers have not been there for it. And it's fun making shops a destination, but again it's
how do you build off that?
How do you build off that, and what are you doing to make yourself a destination more than just that one day a year?
Right. Now this one is kind of a loaded one, just given its recent history. The Coldest City.
I still feel like the first draft of that script from Anthony is one of the best first draft graphic novel scripts I've ever read. It's really interesting to see what they did with Atomic Blonde, just because from a story and plot perspective, it matches the book incredibly well until a very, very, very late turn.
Mm-hmm.
But the tone of it is just such a radical departure
Mm-hmm.
that it's been interesting to see the response to the book, particularly like from folks who are discovering it after seeing the film.
Yeah. So this one is, from what I understand, a personal pick for you. Like something that's personally meaningful because I think it was the last one you're involved with, editorially speaking. Sci-Fu coming out soon.
Dope. Yeah, I've known Yehudi for years, and we've always been a big fan of his stuff, but nothing has quite clicked in
Right.
that Oni way until he pitched Sci-Fu.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that he and I worked on a long time. Like, he was a trooper. I think that at least that first issue, he did at least 3 or 4 different like full thumbnail drafts of as we were figuring out just format and size and approach and all of it. But yeah, I'm super proud of how that book turned out in the end, and it's I feel like it's a really nice counterpart to Space Battle, just as like another super fun like high concept adventure that's going to be relatable to a lot of kids.
Yeah. Just 2 more. Kaiju Max.
Unexpected.
That is for damn sure.
And like I even know usually what the broad strokes are for the season going into reading issues, and I still am always surprised. Xander is just such a freaking master across the board, both in the writing and the art. And yeah, that's one of those books that I don't feel like anybody else would be able to publish. Like that's still an Oni book in a way that, like, yeah, would not translate to anybody else.
I picked that up because I like the cover and because I thought the concept, I was just like, oh, this will be entertaining. And then little did I know it was going to, like, Kaiju Max delivers the most broad spectrum of emotions out of any comic I read. It's like stunning. Like I will go from like nearly weeping to laughing hysterically in the same issue.
It's like the most rooted character drama in comics. Yeah, and it's just and it's hard for people to get their heads around because it's such a ridiculous setup, but the pathos is so freaking real in that book.
Yeah, I care more about a goat son of Satan than I do any character in any other comic I read, and like he's just like this tragic character for me. Well, extremely tragic now. But.
And they're very, very, very different, and there's definitely more jokes in the former rather than the latter. But I really feel like Kaiju Max is in that tradition of Barry Ween, which was one of the first Oni books that I read as a like prepping to come up here to move in, to move to Portland and start to work for those guys. But that deceptive, like high concept candy color cover that feels like it should be for kids, and then you open it up and it's immediately like, no, this is definitely not for children.
Yeah.
And just the taking that ridiculous high concept and really putting like some again true grit and emotion into those characters. Like I feel like Xander's doing it on a much bigger scale, just with in terms of how large his cast is and how big his world is, but it's very much in the tradition that I think like Judd set with Barry.
I want to point out that Barry Ween was on my list, and I cut it because I was like, too many books. Barry Ween was the first Oni book I ever read. And I don't even remember how I got it. I think I got it at like a Walden Books when they were having like this sale where they were going out of business, and so everything was like 50% off. And like that book was like shockingly emotional at times. Like there was that one story where I think like Sarah was killed, and like he had
the last arc of that, the last two, the only like 6-issue arc of that book is crazy. Like,
yeah,
it's so wrought, and the end of that, like. And we've talked with Judd over the years about trying to go back and do more Barry, and we still love Judd and would work with him again in a second. So I wouldn't rule out it, never happening, but that's one of those things where like going out on that note too, that of how that series ended with just Barry by himself. himself in the kitchen crying is still like I can see the panel in my head, and I haven't probably read that book in 15 years.
It's so good. Last one I have to say is Rick and Morty, just because like I just want to throw this out there. Like Big Bang Comics in Dublin, it was one of the trades was the top selling graphic novel they had on the year. I talked to Patrick Brower from Challengers. He said that their biggest day of the year was when they had the Rickmobile there, and he said that they had 2,000 people show up, which is staggering. Like, what is that book for you?
Lucky.
Yeah.
I mean, not for nothing, but like we had made a decision to get back into the license game about 3 months before, and I had made the decision earlier after having some missteps and some things that didn't work creatively on the licensing side that the next couple that we did we were going to do a different way. And so we still we had been previously repped at UTA, which is a talent like Hollywood talent agency that reps both Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, and one of the people on their team was somebody I had known who had been on our team when we had been at the agency and who I was still friendly with. And so, I mean, that book came out of us seeing, I think, I saw the pilot, the second episode aired. I made everybody else in the office watch it. And then we reached out to Roiland and Harmon and asked, if they even wanted comics, because Adult Swim had been historically very tight with licensing and merchandising. Like there was absolutely money to be made in the early 2010s off of Aqua Teen Hunger Force comics or whatever, and they always steered clear of that stuff.
I'm still waiting for C-Lab.
So you'll be waiting forever. Well, I mean, and that's the same thing, I think, too. It's why you've never seen any, like, Archer comics, is because that stuff has to be written by Adam, or it's not the same thing. And that kind of unified voice, like Archer or like Doc and Jackson have on Venture, is different than Rick and Morty. Like, Rick and Morty is more of a typical writer's room.
Right.
And Dan and Justin have a huge role in that. And so do several of their other writers that have been through the whole thing. But yeah, no, Dan and Justin were very enthusiastic about wanting not just comics but to sell the hell out. And then we approached Cartoon Network, and they were open to us pitching it and said, please don't talk to Dan or Justin. And so we started having to go through Cartoon Network for everything. And we were the second licensed product out available for Rick and Morty. So that's also helped in that we've had a time to, we've been putting content out since before season 2 started airing. So,
and those fans are desperate for more. And
I don't think they're going to be getting much this year in terms of stuff, other than a lot of awesome comics.
Yeah, and there's like a new miniseries coming, right?
We're doing a series of one-shots throughout the year that take a focus on a variety of fun characters that we feel like didn't get enough play. Yeah, so the first one focuses on a rebuilt Vindicators team from the episode from this last season. And then, we have Crumbopolis Michael and a bunch of other ones coming up throughout the year. That should be fun.
That's rad. All right, so we're going to close with, I like to finish with 5 questions about the person, because you're a huge NBA fan. I'm a huge NBA fan. I'm down in Portland to watch the Pacers lose to the Blazers, because that's what my fate in life is. We're going to do 5 quick questions about basketball. And I have to start with a very tough question for you. It seems like every day somebody's proposing a trade where the Blazers trade one of their 2 guards. They have Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. If you had to trade one, which one would you trade?
It's really hard, and it depends on the day that you ask me. Like, I'm all in on Dame to a certain degree, and most days I'm gonna say keep Dame and Nurk and figure out something else with CJ. But CJ is just so much fun to watch.
Yeah.
He's such just a smart and like he clearly enjoys the game. Like he reminds me a lot of like Quentin Richardson always seemed so freaking happy.
You're just happy to be there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, and he was hitting threes right and left, but
Right.
there was a joy, and it's a different.
I think he was the one person who enjoyed being a Clipper.
Yeah, exactly, and it's different than like the grumpy face swagger that Dame has, which is also awesome, but it's just more fun. It's more lighthearted.
Yeah, I totally understand that. It does seem like Damian really, really pulls for Portland, though. Like, he seems like he genuinely enjoys the city. All right, next question. So we talked about this a little bit before. The Clippers and Rockets just had an insane situation arise that involved secret tunnels and misdirection and gloriousness. It was insane. They were trying to fight Austin Rivers, of all people.
Who didn't even play in that game.
Why was he on the court? He had a huge foot brace on, and Trevor Ariza is trying to shoot threes, and he's standing right next to him on the court. I'm like, how does that not get a technical? Anyways, aside, as an NBA fan, is that fun for you, or is it too ridiculous, too intense?
It's fun for me because it's
not your team.
The Rockets and the Clippers.
Right.
Like it's not just not my team, it's like two teams that I have grown up despising.
Right.
Like it's not like even though they're like a division rival, I wouldn't take the same glee in the Nuggets,
right?
Just because I don't have a problem with
Nuggets.
Denver. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Houston, even though I freaking love Mike D'Antoni, I just...
You grew up a Suns, or you started as a Suns fan, right?
Yeah, because I grew up in Phoenix when it was a one-sport town.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Suns were always my team growing up. But, man, and it being Chris Paul, who I've always thought was kind of a jackass, and he's the freaking union president.
I know. How does that work out? Everybody seemingly hates him.
I don't understand. Well, I don't understand how a union president feels like he can do that. And he's just been a prick since he came back. I don't know if you saw the thing with him taking the layup as time expired on the Blazers when they were already up by 12 or 14.
Did him and Dame get into it?
Oh, Dame was pissed.
Yeah.
And Dame was pissed because Dame had done the same thing to Chicago back in the day, like his rookie season, and he'd been called to task for it. And so Chris Paul, who's supposed to be this savvy veteran, president of the union role model, being a dick is not great.
Supposedly he was a peacemaker. It came out. Although I thought it was funny. Initially they said it was James Harden and Chris Paul got in a fight, and then it evolved into this weird pincer attack on the Clippers. It was crazy.
Oh, that balance and that chemistry has to be
insane.
Trying to transport nitroglycerin. I said as soon as that trade happened, I said there is no way that this season does not end with Chris Paul breaking a chair over James Harden. There's no way. He couldn't handle DeAndre Jordan. What's gonna happen with James Harden?
I feel like they've tried really hard to sell buddy stuff. They did that commercial with the two of them and Trevor Ariza, and I'm just I don't know about this. I don't know about this. All right, next question. Who's your favorite non-Blazer to watch this season?
Oof, that's hard. Embiid.
Yeah. Did you watch the Lakers game?
Yeah.
Oh, God, that was insane.
And I love that the full might of the 76ers organization and fandom is all trying to get him a date with Rihanna.
And then he bailed on it. He bailed on it.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, yesterday he came out. She said, wait until you're an all-star. He got named an all-star, and he's like, I'm over it.
No. God damn it.
He's so ridiculous.
He's so good.
And he's actually really fun, too. I like that he kind of trolls things, and he just has a lot of fun with it. I listened to this podcast with Zach Lowe and Ramona Shelburne, and she said that she did this interview with him where she drove around with him in a car for a while, not Los Angeles. And I love the fact that, you forget that these guys are 21. And apparently, as his personal item that he carries on the plane, because they only have a personal item, he always brings his PS4 because he's I don't want it to get lost. This is too important to me to pack it. I'm just oh my God, Embiid, you're amazing.
That's so good.
All right.
That's why I was joking last night that Jake on the Blazers should just be sitting on the end of the bench playing 2K18 on his Switch, playing out the same game and seeing how it compares with.
Was that Jake Layman?
Yeah, I'm not getting any.
Yeah, might as well. All right, so because I'm a Pacers fan, I have to ask this. When it first happened, everyone said the Pacers were killed in the Paul George trade. I know you're not watching all the time, but as an outsider, do you feel like the Pacers didn't get killed now? Ooh.
Yeah, I mean, No, they didn't get killed because he's going to sign with the Lakers next season anyway.
God, I
So
hope he doesn't.
Oklahoma City gave up all that stuff for a 1-year rental and are having to deal with I have a tough time with OKC because I loved Durant and I like Russell Westbrook is probably my favorite outside of Blazers player.
I love him.
But I hate OKC because I hate what they did to the Sonics. Like I hate that ownership group. It's hard to
You got to separate the players from the ownership group.
Yeah, but
it's hard
because Phoenix has that's why I became a Blazers fan.
Robert
Because
Sarver.
Sarver is a freaking jackass, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore. But yeah, no, it's going to be rough to see him sign with the Lakers.
That will make me very sad. That's why I'm glad he's not doing that from the Pacers. But last question. So The Ringer had a really interesting piece by John Gonzalez that was about like the NBA's middle class and how weird it is to not be one of the teams that's tanking and not be one of the teams that's going for the championship. And like we're both fans of middle class teams. I'm a fan of the Pacers. You're a fan of the Blazers.
They have the same record as of last night, I think.
Yeah. We were 24. Yeah, I guess we're the exact same now, both 24 and 21. Although we are playing the Lakers tonight, so I feel like it's soon to be 25 and 21. But
that's fair.
So, do you take joy? Like this is kind of a big question, but it's like NBA is a culture of rings. It's like hardwood proxies and Matt Moore always says rings. That's all that matters and everything like that. But do you take joy out of the process? Like not the Joel Embiid process, but the being forever decent process.
I have to because my team. Like I grew up in Phoenix. I lived in Phoenix until 2000. I was still a Suns fan even after that. For a long time, and Phoenix has never won anything.
Yeah.
Like they've been to the finals twice, but they've never actually gone over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved to Portland, where like I was 2 when the last time they won a championship, and it's just I have to enjoy the process. And again, like I'm also like when I really dove deep into being a Portland fan was as everything was picking up here, or like what they thought was building like a Brandon Roy, LaMarcus Aldridge, Greg Oden dynasty, and like to watch just the knee implosion that happened.
Just like across the board with everybody besides LMA.
Yeah. Who was finally playing like a baller again. All he had to do was like
try to get traded.
Pop.
Oh,
no, they had a whole thing where like it was him asking to be traded was the thing that like got him and Pop talking again, and like the whole like I read I can't remember who had interviewed Popovich. That's another one that's rough for me because like I hate the Spurs so much growing up a Suns fan, but like I love Popovich so much.
One of my best friends that like in comics, he is a huge Suns fan, and he hates the Spurs more than I hate anything. Like he hates them. I had no idea, but I guess like they did have a lot of playoff series.
Oh yeah, no, I mean that was it. It was they got knocked out by the Robinson Spurs a bunch like after that first Barkley run.
Yeah,
the Spurs and Rockets, because that was the Lakers all sucked during that era.
Yeah, I like I would love to win a championship. I'd love the Pacers win a championship, but I like the process. I was telling somebody at the game last night. I was like, I'd rather watch a Pacers regular season game than anybody besides my team in the Super Bowl. Like if it was just like it was like the Baltimore Ravens and New York Giants in the Super Bowl, I'd rather watch a random NBA game.
Oh yeah, I can't. NBA is my one like sporting thing.
Yeah.
Like I like soccer, okay, and we'll watch like World Cup stuff usually, but yeah, I don't go for football or anything like that. And swimming now because my teenage daughter is a swimmer, so
not a lot of opportunity to watch that though, except for in person.
That's I have to go to a meet tonight.
All right. Well, James, that's all I have for you. Thank you for the chat.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with Oni Press's publisher, James Lucas Jones. You can find him on Twitter at James Lucas Jones. If you're a fan of the show, there's some big news. Off Panel now has a Patreon. If you like the show and want to support it, consider backing it on Patreon at patreon.com/offpanel. There are fun rewards and insider information you get if you do. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Evan Blazer, Andrew Scott, Brian McRae, Ira James Udaskin, Benjamin Birdie, Henning Allers, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bruno Batista, Abraham Reisman, Adrian Diaz, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, Darren Neely, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Michael Perlman, Phil Nall, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Schipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Maxwell Schmidt, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Lou Iovino, Christopher Carter, Nicholas Kesslake, Brian Dickerson, Greg Rucka, Ryan Mayle, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DeMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter at @sketchcomic, or follow me at @slicefriedgold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from the album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.